Good day, everyone. Welcome to Real Conservative News. I'm your host, Nathaniel Rajkumar, starting off locally here in Trinidad and Tobago. Less than 24 hours after Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar met with United States Energy Secretary Chris Wright, Energy Minister Dr Roodal Moonilal says global energy giant Chevron is already knocking on Trinidad and Tobago's door. Speaking with Guardian Media during Pandavas Pagua celebrations at Palmas Park in San Fernando, Moonilal also responded to critics who questioned his absence during the bilateral discussions with Wright, explaining that the Prime Minister attended a meeting of heads of government exactly, where she would have discussed various matters and could not take her entire cabinet with her. You know, if she had taken more and more people, they would have criticized her for spending too much of money. Moonilal said it was not by coincidence that Chevron expressed interest in doing business with TNT just 24 hours after Prime Minister Persad-Bissessar raised certain very important matters regarding the energy sector with Wright. My response, these companies aren't influenced by tribalism, and that's why when they see the most powerful leader of the free world, President Trump, forming a close alliance with the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, they will immediately become interested in investing in our country. Now, I'm not saying that Wright didn't have any type of influence as well, but I'm telling you, the most impressive part about this is seeing how President Trump even handed the pen that he signed the deal with to Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar, which was a very significant thing that that took place there, people. It symbolizes, it shows his trust and his admiration and respect for our Prime Minister. Yes, she acted a little goofy, but so what? So what? You know, if it was a PNM politician, let's say it was Penny, that acted a little goofy around somebody, the greatest leader in the entire world at this point in time, no one would have said anything about that, you know, because they would have said, you know, that's how probably women behave at times. But because it's Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar, they have a problem with it. I went on to say, let the rest of Caribbean leaders continue being obsessed with their hatred for colonialism and see where it gets them. Emancipate yourself from tribalism, or remain in third world status for the rest of the end times, because we are in the end times, people. And I'm not looking at this as though, we have a bright and long future ahead. I'm just happy that certain good things are happening to our country, that we can start to recover a bit financially during these times. Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar is hitting back at critics who have expressed concerns that the regulations governing the recent state of emergency seek to suppress public meetings and interfere with free speech, assembly, and expression. In a social media post, the Prime Minister compared the 2024 state of emergency regulations under the PNM-led government, noting that regulations faced a constitutional challenge because the term public order was seen as overly broad and potentially restrictive of freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and freedom of assembly. This term was amended and signed into law on March 1st, 2025. She noted, however, that in 2026, under her government, there's no such restriction. The Prime Minister clarified that Regulation 11 prohibits attempts to influence public opinion in ways likely to be prejudicial to public safety. In other words, I would assume that means inciting of violence and so forth, and possession of or doing anything that facilitates such attempts. The R word we are talking about there. The key difference is that the 2026 SOE restricts only actions harmful to public safety, which will include, of course, what? Destruction of property and buildings and so forth, like what takes a place a lot in Democrat regions of United States of America. While the 2024 SOE restricted actions considered harmful to both public safety and public order. Now, bear in mind, what she says there clarifies a whole lot, because we were very concerned about that. So therefore, it's not really about trying to prohibit anyone from criticizing the government, but it's just about, as I was saying all along, do not incite violence. It is a crime anyhow you take it. Having said that, I continue to disagree with using an SOE to control crime. It is just like putting a plaster on a sore that hasn't been cleaned, it hasn't been treated. When you take off that plaster, when the SOE ends, crime is going to escalate again. What you need to do, Prime Minister, is reform the TTPS, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Get rid of make sure that the police service has a new head, a new leader that will genuinely seek to remove all the rogue elements within the police service, and also make the training, the whole training system different, so that police officers don't leave the training period believing that they are above the law and that they can treat citizens any way that they want to. Ensure that body cameras are mandated so that all police officers, while interacting with citizens, with civilians, would be able to will conduct themselves in a proper manner. And if they are found to be performing any sort of inappropriate actions, they will be held accountable for those actions. Not just having some sort of investigation and then afterwards, months later, you're still seeing them on duty. These are the things that you need to do. And also, what you need to do is ensure that the individuals that are entering the police service have proper education and training in order to be able to improve the detection rate. The detection rate is the most important issue affecting the police service besides the corruption and the extrajudicial killings and so forth, people. The detection rate in the police service is too low. So even having an SOE doesn't make a difference, because all you're doing is just locking up people, but you don't have police officers who have the ability to be able to conduct proper investigations, to obtain the evidence needed to prosecute these individuals. So that's why after the SOEs are expired, they end up back on the streets. A PH taxi driver was kidnapped and robbed by 3 men during the early hours on Friday as he stopped to drop off a passenger in Cunupia, and that's in spite of an SOE. The ordeal later ended with suspects driving to the victim's house, where he was ordered to hand over a certain amount of cash, while they threatened to murder his family if he refused to comply. And this is why, people, we need to ensure that laws are changed so that if these individuals are arrested and prosecuted, any sort of armed robbery, any sort of violent crime should result in 20+ years in prison. India won the T20 World Cup for a record 3rd time with a 96-run victory over New Zealand, to the delight of more than 100,000 fans at the largest cricket ground in the world on Sunday. India scored an imposing 255 for 5. Yes, people, that's very impressive, because this is not a one-day international. In the final, after losing the toss and batting at Narendra Modi Stadium, opener Sanju Samson hit a brilliant 46-ball 89 with 8 sixes in his 3rd straight 50. India won the T20 World Cup in 2007 and in 2024. New Zealand was aiming for its first T20 World Cup triumph. It also finished as a runner-up in the 2021 final, losing to Australia in Dubai. Congratulations to India. Don't go anywhere. Regional news up next.
Weather forecast for Trinidad and Tobago Monday, the 9th of March. For Monday, the 9th of March, 2026. The weather in Trinidad and Tobago is forecast to be fair and breezy to windy, with brief cloudy spells and a few light showers. General forecast. Conditions: expect a mix of sunshine and scattered clouds. The day will be notably breezy, with winds potentially becoming windy at times in some areas. Rainfall. There is a low chance of precipitation approx. 16-22% with brief showers or sprinkles possible, particularly later in the day. UV index. The UV index is expected to be high 7, so sun protection is strongly recommended. Temperature and humidity. High temperature 31 degrees Celsius. Piarco to 30 degrees Celsius. Crown point. It may feel as hot as 32 degrees Celsius, 89 degrees Fahrenheit in certain areas due to humidity. Low temperature around 23 degrees Celsius to 24 degrees Celsius, 75 degrees Fahrenheit overnight. Humidity expected to average around 56%.
President Dr. Irfan Ali has said that Guyana supports the United States' strong action against transnational criminals and networks. President Ali made these remarks on the sidelines of the Shield of the Americas summit with Fox News Live. Guyana as well is now being well known on the world stage, people. U.S. President Donald Trump, alongside leaders from more than 17 countries across the Americas, on Saturday signed a major regional security alliance aimed at eradicating drug cartels across the Western Hemisphere. A coalition of over 17 nations has joined the new U.S.-led military partnership to destroy drug trafficking. Meanwhile, the rest of the tribal Caribbean and PNM thinking about colonialism. This summit saw the U.S. welcoming its strongest like-minded allies. You see how they're thinking about Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar in our hemisphere to promote freedom, security, and prosperity in our region. This historic coalition of nations will work together to advance strategies that stop foreign interference in the hemisphere, criminal and narco-terrorist gangs and cartels, and illegal and mass immigration. Really, I'm telling you, you really had to wonder what is wrong with the rest of the leaders in the Caribbean and the PNM here in Trinidad and Tobago and their jihadist friends as well in some of the other parties, the third parties that could never win an election in Trinidad. The Jamaican government has moved to shed more light on the reasons it discontinued the Cuba-Jamaica medical program, saying it wanted an arrangement that was in keeping with local and international law. In a statement, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs said chief among the government's concerns was that Cuba and the Cuban medical professionals were not in possession of their own passports, and that outside of overtime payments, their salaries were not paid directly to them. You hearing that? It was not, the salaries did not go directly to the doctors, the medical staff. It instead went to the Cuban authorities. And it was paid by Jamaica, which was paid in US dollars. So in other words, US dollars was going to fund the Cuban communist government, and that needed to stop. The Ministry of Health and Wellness in Barbados has launched a glaucoma awareness campaign during World Glaucoma Week, offering free screenings across Barbados. That is wonderful news. The week observed from March 8th to 14th under the theme Uniting for a Glaucoma-Free World, will feature a series of activities aimed at raising awareness and about the disease, often referred to as a silent cause of blindness. Crime statistics released by the police commissioner last month show a 29 overall drop in reported domestic violence cases in the Bahamas. That is good news. Hopefully it even drops even more. There needs to be harsher penalties for men especially. Women do commit acts of domestic violence, but most of the time it's fellow men who commit these crimes. And stop giving excuses about crime of passion and so forth. If a man murders his wife and other family members, let him face the ultimate punishment, just like anyone else, or at least life in prison. Also, what I want, and I have been saying that for many years now, I want the school system and I want the media, but especially in the schools, and definitely at homes, but in the schools, that from even in primary school, you start to teach the young men to understand that women are their partners in relationship, not property. And for those certain types of Christians, because I'm a born-again Christian, certain types of Christians that use the Paul apostles, submit to your wives verse. Let's be very clear about something. Paul the apostle balanced it off by also telling husbands to love your wife the way Christ loves the church. And he also said to submit to one another because Christ himself is actually the head of the home. And therefore, if you love your wife the way Christ loves the church, you will care about her needs, her desires, her opinions. And also you will respect that you do not own that individual. And in case of an infidelity, you are free to leave, or you can forgive, but you can leave, you can end the relationship. But if a woman decides she wants to leave a relationship, end the relationship, You have no rights to try to take her life because of that or harm her because of that. She belongs to God, not you.
Crime statistics released by the police commissioner last month show a 29% overall drop in reported domestic violence cases. Police say incidents such as assaults with a deadly weapon, threats of harm, and threats of death have each seen near 50% declines. In total, 1,859 domestic-related cases were reported in 2025 compared to 2,630 in 2024. But Bahamas Crisis Center Administrator Cleopatra Christie tells me she is still concerned about victims who may never report their abuse.
So many women out there who suffer from this particular crime and they do not come forward for any number of reasons. It could be financial, it could be that the fear, it could be they don't have anywhere to live.
The issue is also being addressed at the government level. Social Services Minister Miles Larota telling reporters that one of government's 2 domestic violence shelters has now been completed, all part of a broader effort to support victims seeking help.
History have told us that those who actually come forward represent a small percentage, and so we should be concerned if it's 29. And we should hope and pray that that numbers reflect more of the reality than what history have shown, just a small percentage of those suffering at the hands of violence.
And for Anne-Marie Davis, spouse of the Prime Minister, the fight against domestic violence is far from over.
I am happy to see the numbers coming down because we are sensitizing and educating people more and more about women's rights, domestic violence, what's the whole social justice system, equality, empowering women, even bringing along engaging boys and men in this fight. So I am happy to see the numbers coming down. I think we're finally going to see what the true picture.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Joshua Williams.
International news now. No one was hurt after a woman fired multiple rounds at the Beverly Hills residence of Barbadian pop star Rihanna on Sunday. What was the motive for that? Rihanna was home at a time, law enforcement source confirmed. Police responded to reports of the shooting at 1:21 p.m., taking a 30-year-old female suspect into custody. Well, at least they apprehended the person. You see cases like that, 20 plus years in prison, let justice be served. The Israeli Defense Force can now reveal that, guided by the IDF intelligence, the IRGC's Air Force headquarters were targeted during wide-scale IDF strikes on dozens of Iranian terror regime targets. The site was the main command and control center used to direct the regime's Air Force activity. The Iranian terror regime's ballistic missile command, unmanned aerial vehicle array, and other Air Force units all operated in the headquarters. So now they have really been disabled significantly. I mean, they're going to continue to strike Israel and even their own allies. Just now the allies will get fed up, but at least their capability has been significantly reduced. The Air Force headquarters was also responsible for producing a situational picture and for planning missile attacks on the state of Israel and countries and other countries in the region. The strike on the Iranian terror regime's Air Force is part of the concentrated effort to dismantle the Iranian ballistic missile array while impairing its ability to synchronize and coordinate attacks on the state of Israel. The IDF continues to strike Iranian regime targets in order to further dismantle the Iranian terror regime's capabilities. Now for the interesting facts segment, love proved that age is just a number for Harold Terrence and Jean Swirling. The couple met in South Florida after friends arranged a blind date. Despite being in their late 90s and early 100s, what a blessed age to reach. Their connection quickly grew into a romantic relationship. You feel that ends when they get old? No. They later married and continued to enjoy life together while maintaining separate homes. That's the part I love the most. Terrence, who previously lost his wife after decades of marriage, says their relationship makes them feel like teenagers again, teenagers in love, inspiring many with their story of companionship later in life. My response, even though it is very serious, is quite comical. The best part of this story is that they maintain their own homes. Hopefully that means that Pops can still reside in his own castle a lot of the time. If I could only find a woman who's willing to have a faithful relationship like this, I will be so happy.
Welcome to Real Conservative News Travel Adventure. Prague, the city of 100 spires, is a captivating, walkable UNESCO World Heritage Site known for its fairy tale, medieval atmosphere, Gothic architecture, and vibrant, affordable nightlife. Centered around the Vieltova River, this safe historic capital offers iconic landmarks like Charles Bridge, the massive Prague Castle, and the Old Town Square's astronomical clock. Explore the 5th century Prague Castle, wander the cobblestone streets of Old Town, Staré Město, and walk across the famous Charles Bridge. Visit the Jewish Quarter, watch the astronomical clock, and take in a classical concert or opera. For an unforgettable experience, wander the lesser town Balastrana at night and explore the city's diverse and well-preserved history, which was untouched during World War II. Wow.
Folks, that brings us to the end of today's news report. Thanks again to everyone who continues to support my content. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stay blessed and stay safe most of all. In Jesus' name.